How did this rich boy become the punchline of every F1 meme? Today, we're breaking down the moments Lance Stroll turned Formula One into a fucking circus. From jaw-dropping crashes to baffling strategy blunders, Stroll's moments of "what the fuck just happened" have left fans furious and engineers face-palming. How did each incident unfold? Who paid the price on and off the track? And most importantly, why does his seat stay warm despite every spectacular meltdown? Strap in, because we're reliving the chaos and controversy that only Lance Stroll, one of the most polarizing figures on the grid, could deliver, and prepare for a front row seat to F1's most memeable moments.
That was mega!
Forgive me for leaning into the theatrics here, but if you thought F1 was all about raw talent and merit, buckle up, because Lance Stroll's roller coaster through the sport reads more like a high-stakes soap opera than a conventional racing career. From the moment young Lance first strapped into a kart, the whispers began, "He's quick!" But is it all down to skill? It's true that in karting circles, where future champions are forged, Stroll posted solid results, often mixing it with the best. Yet alongside the roar of his engine was the unmistakable hum of a bank account straining under the weight of six-figure karting budgets. While his peers were scraping together sponsorship binders, Lance's father, Canadian billionaire Lance Stroll, quietly wrote checks in the millions, greasing the wheels, quite literally, of young Lance's ascent. When Lance graduated to the ultra-competitive world of European Formula 3, the story was much the same, but on steroids. In 2016, driving for the powerhouse Prema team, he steamrolled the championship, collecting podiums almost at will. On paper, it looked like a masterclass in talent, but insiders will tell you that Prema's factory-level resources, courtesy of the Stroll wallet, elevated his car from fast to virtually unbeatable. Mechanics who usually shuffled time over minor tweaks had deep pockets to call on cutting-edge aerodynamic parts and bespoke setups. The result? A season of dominance that prompted as much envy as applause and plenty of raised eyebrows when the podium champagne settled. Now, if you're enjoying this deep dive into Lance Stroll's wild ride through F1, tap that like button. Hit subscribe for more unapologetic commentary and drop a comment below. Do you think money talks louder than talent in F1, or can Stroll still prove the doubters wrong? Williams' debut. A seat bought, not earned, by the twilight of 2016, the once proud Williams team found itself gasping for survival, strapped for cash, and desperately in need of fresh capital. Enter Lance Stroll, with a sponsorship deal fat enough to make the accountants swoon, and bundled within was a rookie named Lance, aged just 18. Imagine the boardroom scene. A laden table of checkbooks on one side, and on the other, a handful of starched contracts waiting for a signature. It was a match made in commercial heaven, even if the purists recoiled. Thus, in March 2017, Lance Stroll rocketed into Formula One in Williams' signature blue and white livery, making him one of the youngest starters in Grand Prix history. Expectations? Off the charts. But reality struck hard. His teammate, the venerable Felipe Massa, navigated the same machinery with a steady hand, while Lance's rookie gaffes became unwelcome spectacles. First-lap collisions, spin-outs, and off-pace qualifying laps painted a picture of a driver still grasping the basics of F1 finesse. One of the more notorious incidents came in Shanghai, where a misjudgment at turn 1 set off a clattering collision that ended his race before it barely began. Bahrain followed with another first-lap tangle against Carlos Sainz, and before long, pundits were questioning whether the boy was truly cut out for this tier of motorsport. Yet, in the grand theatre of F1, chaos can be a blessing in disguise. Baku 2017 delivered a monsoon of mayhem that shook every contender, except Lance. In the swirling debris of crashed cars, rain-soaked runoffs and safety cars galore, Stroll found himself on the podium in third. Cue the flashbulbs and headlines proclaiming youngest rookie podium. But the moment was bittersweet. Sure, records were broken, but were they earned? Critics argued that it was the pandemonium, not pendulum-perfect precision, that gifted him his trophy. Nevertheless, the checkered flag waved, and for a moment the naysayers paused. After all, a podium in F1, regardless of circumstance, is a podium. Financial firepower from Williams to Racing Point. Williams struggled on, brimming with heritage, but devoid of competitiveness. Yet through it all, Lance's seat remained rock solid. No internal inquiry, no boardroom coup, no questions asked. Why? Because while his lap times might have lagged, his wallet never did. In late 2018, Lance Stroll led a consortium to acquire the embattled Force India outfit, swiftly rebranding it as Racing Point. Overnight, Lance's future was secured. The heir apparent now had a team to call his own. Of course, that meant displacing Esteban Ocon, a driver respected for genuine on-track talent. The optics were bleak. A talented driver shown the door in favour of a second-generation pay driver. Sharing a garage with Sergio Perez in 2019 should have sharpened Lance's skills, pitting him against a proven race winner. Instead, the disparity was glaring. Perez outqualified him 18 times in 21 attempts and regularly finished ahead in races with the same car. Middle-distance duels ended badly for Lance, with misjudged overtakes and contact points stretching from Barcelona's Turn 1 to Canada's long back straight. Perhaps the worst was Hungary 2019, where Lance's late-breaking lunge on Norris sent both cars tumbling off track, fueling memes and mutterings in equal measure. Fans began to tally his mistakes like pit stops, and the trust fund toddler jibe became a staple of social media banter. Then came the Turkish Grand Prix 2020, in a season otherwise marked by monotony. Rain, slicked asphalt, and a notoriously slippery track handed Lance his one moment in the sun, pole position. Suddenly, headlines lauded the Canadian as a wet-weather wizard. But in race trim, grip was lost, tyres degraded, and he tumbled down the order, barely clinging to points. His excuses ranged from wrong tyre pressures to poor visibility, while Perez in the sister car carved through the field to P2. It was emblematic, a fleeting flash of brilliance, snuffed out by follow-through failure. The question hung in the damp Turkish air. Had he shown mastery or merely luck? Okay, now let's discuss the emerald green elephant in the room. By 2021, Racing Point rebadged as Aston Martin, heralding an influx of glamour with four-time world champion Sebastian Vettel joining the fold. Vettel's move was a coup, until one looked at the grid sheets. Lance Stroll retained his berth without batting an eyelid, while Vettel slotted into what should have been Stroll's contested seat. It was a public relations dream for Aston's board, but a PR nightmare for racing purists. If a four-time champ needed no introduction, why then was the perennial underdog still assured a cockpit? The season's highs for Stroll were limited. A decent points haul in Baku. The lows, however, included an infamous brake misjudgment at Imola that saw him backwards into his own pit crew. For a team rebranded on heritage and performance, it stood out like a sore, if not spark-spewing thumb. 2022 to 2023. A pattern of painful consistency. Australia 2022 saw Lance miscalculate an overtake on Nicholas Latifi, scrubbing his front wing on the wall. In Austin, a late lunge on Alonso nearly turned into vehicular tragedy. Levers were scratched, helmets dented, but Lance's reputation took the biggest hit. Through 2023, with Alonso now at Aston, Stroll was the apprentice to an undeniable master. While Alonso's podiums dripped in polish, Stroll's outings read like a blooper reel. Spins in Monaco, qualifying crashes in Singapore, and a public meltdown in Qatar, where he chucked his steering wheel in frustration. Perhaps the nada came in Sao Paulo 2024, when formation lap gravel traps made him a meme-worthy headline, the man who couldn't even reach the starting grid. Rare booing echoed around Interlagos, an unprecedented rebuke in the courteous world of F1 fandom. So let's talk about money versus merit, the existential question. Through it all, the same paradox persists. Formula One markets itself as the pinnacle of motorsport excellence, yet here sits a driver whose lifeline is his surname. While countless gifted racers scrub, scrape, and sacrifice to climb the ladder, only to be discarded when budgets dry up, Lance Stroll skis over the same rungs in bespoke ski boots, never threatening to slip. Critics decry the pay driver era, but in Stroll's case, the pay driver also wields ownership. Financial muscle has long been part of F1's DNA, yet rarely has it been so nakedly on display. In a sport of margins, measured in thousandths of a second, how can we reconcile a narrative where dollars, not decibels, determine destiny? So what's next for Lance? Will he ever convert privilege into podium-poised performance? There have been glimpses, just enough to keep hope flickering, but they're eclipsed by a history of errors under pressure. If Alonso remains the yardstick, Stroll's lap times will need more than incremental improvements. They'll need a quantum leap. Yet as long as Daddy Stroll backs him, the usual consequences for underperformance may never apply. In the final reckoning, Lance Stroll's career is a crucible for Formula One's greatest tension, the clash between pure racing on merit and the inevitable gravitational pull of money. Whether you root for the underdog or rail against perceived injustice, his story forces us to confront F1's foundational question. What truly decides who gets to race and who has the right to win? And in that, perhaps, lies the sport's richest drama of all.